I'm Marlene Turner, I'm 34, I'm a single mom, and I destroyed my own brother's life. And before anybody jumps into the comments with family is everything, let me paint you one image I will never forget. My 12-year-old daughter standing in my parents' living room, clutching her empty hands where her savings box used to be, cheeks wet, voice shaking as she says, "Uncle Brent, why did you take my money?" And my brother, let's call him the parasite, doesn't just lie. He slaps her. Hard. Right across the face. Then he looks me dead in the eye and says, "It's just a bastard kid." That was the moment something in me snapped. And also became razor sharp. I looked at him and said, very calmly, "Enjoy your last few days of peace." He laughed. My parents defended him. They called me dramatic, accused me of making trouble. They had no idea I had the receipts. Literal video. Fake texts. A whole history of his scams. A week later his job was gone, his accounts were frozen, his name was trash in the whole city, and my parents were begging me to fix it. I didn't. If you've ever had family stab you in the back and then expect you to smile through it, stick around. This one's for you. Before we dive in, if you like stories about justice, karma, and people finally standing up for themselves, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, tap like, and drop your own family horror story in the comments. It really helps this channel grow, and I read a lot of them. Okay. So it all started long before that slap. I didn't grow up thinking I'd ever sit in a courtroom and watch my brother get sentenced. If you'd met us as kids in Albuquerque, you would have seen a normal family. My dad, Jose, working long hours at a tire shop. My mom, Linda, juggling part-time jobs. Me, the older one, quiet, responsible, doing dishes and homework. And my little brother, Brent, 2 years younger, loud, charming, the fun one. Funny how the fun one always seems to become the irresponsible disaster in these stories. The favoritism started early, but as a kid, you don't have that word. You just have this sick feeling that whatever you do, it's never quite enough. When I brought home A's, Mom would say, "That's good, honey," and then turn around and gush over Brent for getting a C+ in math. See? He can do it if he tries. When I stayed home to watch my baby cousin so my parents could go out, I was helpful. When Brent watched him for 10 minutes, he was such a good young man. Little things. 1,000 little things. But there was one night that stuck with me. I must have been 16, Brent 14. I was at the kitchen table studying for a chemistry exam, and Brent swaggered in late, smelling like cigarettes and cheap beer. Mom looked up from the sink. "Where were you?" she asked, but it wasn't angry. More worried. He shrugged. "Just hanging out." Dad came in from the den, saw him, and instead of grounding him like I expected, he clapped Brent on the shoulder. "You're a young man," Dad said. "Just don't get caught doing something stupid, okay?" I remember looking up from my textbook and thinking, if that were me, I'd be grounded until graduation. I wasn't jealous, I was confused. Like I was living in some alternate version of reality where the rules only applied to one kid. I didn't have a name for it then. I do now. Enabling. Fast forward a bit. I got pregnant at 21, married at 22, divorced by 23. My ex, Tyler, bailed as soon as life got real. The moment diapers, rent, and pediatric visits showed up, he vanished. Child support? Please. I've seen more consistent money fall out of broken vending machines. So it became me and my baby girl, just the two of us in a tiny apartment with peeling paint and a leaky faucet. I worked the graveyard shift as a bank teller and studied for my banking certifications in the quiet hours. I'd memorize lending regulations while my daughter slept in a playpen behind the teller line, wrapped in a blanket, because daycare was a luxury we simply couldn't afford in those early months. People love to say, single moms are so strong. No. We're not strong. We're desperate. Strength comes later. At first, it's just survival. There were nights when I'd walk home under those harsh Albuquerque streetlights, my feet aching, doing math in my head. Rent. Formula. Gas. Maybe some fresh fruit if it's on sale. I still remember the feeling the day my manager pulled me into her office and said, "Marlene, we're promoting you to assistant branch manager." It wasn't just a raise. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't a failed single mom, Like my brother loved to call me whenever he was drunk and trying to look clever in front of our parents. It was proof I was building something. Meanwhile, Brent bounced from job to job. Security guard, server, phone salesman. He always had a story about why it wasn't his fault when things didn't work out. The manager had it out for me. The customers were idiots. Corporate is a scam. And every time, Mom would pat his arm and say, "You'll find your place, mijo. You're too smart not to." Whenever I came over with my daughter, there'd be some backhanded comment waiting for me. "Oh, look, the career woman is here," Brent would say, smirking. "How's life in your little cubicle prison?" Or worse, when he'd glance at my daughter and mutter under his breath, "Poor kid. No dad. Rough start." I'd feel my jaw clench, but Mom would say, "He's just joking, Marlene. You're too sensitive." No. I wasn't too sensitive. They were too comfortable ignoring cruelty. My daughter, let's call her Lily, started drawing as soon as she could hold a crayon. Princesses at first. Then dragons. Then girls with laser guns and neon hair racing through futuristic cities. Her notebooks were filled with these bright, wild worlds. One day, when she was about 9, we were at the mall and walked past a computer store. She stopped dead in front of a display. This thing was a beast. High-end graphics card. Massive curved monitor. It looked like it could power a spaceship. "Mom," she whispered, like she'd seen a unicorn. That's it. That's my computer. The one I need to be a real artist." The price tag? $3,999. I almost laughed. I could barely afford my used hatchback, let alone a computer that cost as much as a used car. "I know it's a lot," I said carefully, kneeling to her level. "But maybe. One day. If we plan." She turned those big brown eyes on me and said something that hit me straight in the chest. "Can I save for it? Like how you save, Mom?" So we built a plan. I got her a small metal cash box, the kind with a tiny key. We wrote Lily's dream fund on top with a purple Sharpie. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time Grandma slipped her a 20 just because, every dollar she got from walking Mrs. Garcia's dogs, or helping me clean out the storage closet at the bank, she put some of it in the box. We opened a basic savings account in her name and I deposited in batches once it grew. I printed out statements so she could see it grow. $257.30. $843.90. $2,100.15. Her eyes would light up every time. "Look, Mom. It's working." I'd smile and say, "That's what happens when you respect your money. Money is just a tool, baby. You're learning how to use it." By the time she was 12, the statements showed $13,200 saved. She'd upgraded her dream, better hardware, a drawing tablet, software licenses, but her determination never changed. It wasn't just a purchase anymore. It was proof to her that she could build her own future. Meanwhile, guess who kept joking about it? Brent, the parasite. At family dinners, he'd nudge her and say, "Hey, Lily, how about you lend your favorite uncle a couple hundred from that treasure chest of yours?" She'd laugh nervously and say, "No, that's for my computer," and hug the metal box closer if she'd brought it to count. Mom would roll her eyes and say, "Hey, Brent. Leave the girl alone. She's serious about this." But there was always that tone, like it was cute, not serious. Like it was pretend money, Monopoly bills, not actual years of sacrifice. I should have taken those jokes more seriously. It was a Friday in late September. I remember because I'd just survived a brutal week at the branch. New system rollout, understaffed, 2 customers threatening to call corporate every hour. I was fried. Lily got home before me and texted, "Mom, can we check the account tonight? I think I hit 13K. I smiled at my phone in the break room, typed back, "Absolutely. Ice cream and account check tonight." By the time I pulled into our driveway, the desert sky was turning pink. I could already picture her bouncing in front of the laptop, eager to see the numbers. Instead, I walked in and found her sitting on the couch, white as a sheet, her hands shaking. "Mom," she whispered. "It's gone." My stomach dropped. "What's gone?" She just pointed to the shelf where her metal box usually sat. Empty space. I felt everything slow down, like my brain was moving through thick syrup. Are you sure you didn't move it? Maybe last night. I checked everywhere, she said, her voice breaking. It's not in my closet, it's not under the bed, it's not in your room. It's just gone. I could see in her eyes that this wasn't teenage drama. This was real. This was grief. My first instinct was to tear the house apart. To accuse the landlord. To scream. Instead, something in me clicked into bank manager mode. Okay, I said, trying to sound calm. We're going to look at the cameras. We live in a not-so-great part of Albuquerque. After a break-in a few years ago, I installed a couple of cheap security cameras, front door, living room. Lily followed me to the kitchen table where my laptop sat. I pulled up the app, rewound to that morning. There it was. 8:47 a.m. Our front door opens. Brent walks in like he owns the place. I watched, my pulse pounding in my ears, as he glances around, goes straight to the living room shelf, grabs the metal box, tucks it under his arm, and walks out. Like it was nothing. Like he was grabbing a lunchbox he'd forgotten. My hand flew to my mouth. Lily stared at the screen, horrified. Why would he do that? She whispered. Why? Why Uncle Brent? I didn't have an answer. My brain was switching rapidly between memories. Him teasing her about her little dragon piggy bank. Mom saying, he's just joking. Dad saying, he's had a hard life, Marlene. Cut him some slack. I'd cut slack until there was no rope left. Now he'd use that slack to hang my kid's dream. I sat there for a full minute, breathing slowly, fighting the urge to drive straight to his apartment and tear the place apart. Instead, I did something different. I grabbed my phone and texted Janice. Janice and I met at a financial literacy seminar years ago. She's a family lawyer with sharp cheekbones, sharp pursuits, and the sharpest mind I've ever seen on a woman who still laughs at cat memes. She's seen people lose houses, kids, pensions, all because family abused their trust. She doesn't romanticize blood ties. I sent her the video with a simple message. He stole Lily's savings. What do I do? She called me 30 seconds later. What am I looking at? She asked, her tone already professional. That's my brother, I said. That box is my daughter's savings. $13,200. There was a pause on the line. Okay, she said slowly. Do not confront him alone. Not yet. And don't delete that video. In fact, back it up to 3 places. I swallowed. He's my brother, Janice. And your daughter is your child, she shot back. Guess whose side I'm on? She walked me through the basics, document everything, don't touch any other evidence, double-check that Lily never gave him permission. I looked at my daughter, whose knees were pulled up to her chest on the couch, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her world together. Did you ever tell him he could borrow the money? I asked. She shook her head vigorously. No, Mom. Never. I wouldn't. That was enough for me. The old me, the girl who grew up in a house where a family stays out of trouble and we handle things privately, would have gone over there and tried to talk sense into him. The new me, the bank manager single mom who knew how the system worked, decided. We're doing this by the book. And if the book crushes him, that's on him. The next morning, I drove to my parents' place. I didn't go alone. Lily sat beside me, quiet but determined, and Janice sat in the back seat, a calm presence, file folder on her lap. I won't lie, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. This wasn't just a confrontation. It felt like walking into a trial where I already knew the judge and jury were biased. Mom's house smelled like coffee and tortillas when we walked in. The TV was murmuring in the background. Brent was slouched in Dad's old recliner, scrolling his phone, socks on the coffee table like he owned the place. Dad sat at the kitchen table, reading the paper. Mom was by the stove. Hey, Dad said, without looking up. You're early. Everything okay? I didn't bother with small talk. Brent, I said, stepping into the living room. Where's my daughter's money? He looked up slowly. What? You used the spare key I gave you a year ago. You came into my house yesterday, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. You took Lily's metal box. That box had $13,200 in it. Where is it? His eyes narrowed for a microsecond, then his face smoothed over into that fake confused innocence I'd seen him use on girlfriends, bosses, even cops. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. I haven't been to your place in weeks. Lily stepped forward, her voice trembling, but clear. Uncle Brent, we saw you. On the camera. You took it. And that's when he did it. He stood up, walked right up to her, and slapped her across the face. The sound echoed in the room. Lily's head snapped to the side, her hand flew up to her cheek, eyes wide with shock. My body went cold. I grabbed her, pulling her behind me. What the hell is wrong with you? I hissed. He shrugged, like he'd just swatted a fly. Teach your bastard kid not to lie, he said casually. Maybe then she won't accuse people of stealing. Behind me, I heard Janice intake a sharp breath. She moved closer, voice low but firm. You just assaulted a minor in front of 3 witnesses, she said. You want to rethink that sentence, Brent? My parents rushed in then, Mom dropping her spatula, Dad setting down his coffee. Marlene, what is going on? Mom demanded, taking in Lily's red cheek. I stared at them incredulously. Ask your son. He stole her savings, hit her, and called her a bastard. Dad turned to Brent. Is that true? Brent put a hand to his heart, voice turning weak and wounded. She barged in here screaming at me, Dad. Calling me a thief in front of everyone. I just shoved her away, I didn't hit her. And I didn't take anything. It was like watching a man slip into a costume he'd wore his whole life. The victim costume. Mom's eyes darted between us, then settled on me. You're overreacting, Marlene. Again. Brent wouldn't steal from his own niece. Do you want to see the video? Janice cut in, already pulling out her phone. Dad frowned. Video? Janice tapped and handed it to him. Your son, yesterday morning, entering Marlene's house with a key, going straight to the shelf, and walking out with a metal box. We all watched Dad's face as he watched the footage. His jaw clenched. A vein popped in his temple. When it ended, he shoved the phone back at Janice. That proves nothing, he snapped. Maybe she said he could take it. Maybe it's not what you think. I felt something inside me tilt. Dad, I said slowly, you just watched your son walk into my house and take a box that doesn't belong to him. He glared at me. We're family. We don't involve outsiders in our problems. By outsiders, he meant Janice. The lawyer. The witness. By problems, he meant crimes. Mom stepped closer to Brent, hand on his arm. He's just been struggling, Marlene. You know that. He's had a hard time with money. You're doing well now. Why can't you help instead of attacking him? There it was. The enabler choir in full voice. He's just finding his way. He's had a rough life. You're doing better, you should understand. Janice looked at me, eyes saying what she didn't dare say aloud in their house. They are completely enabling him. You are not the bad guy. I felt Lily's hand clutch my shirt, her cheek still flushed and damp. My blood boiled. I have been helping, I said, my voice low, dangerous. I've bought groceries. I've paid his phone bill. I gave him that spare key in case of emergencies. And he used it to rob a 12-year-old. Brent scoffed. It's just money. You're a bank manager. You probably spend that on shoes. Lily let out a choked sob behind me. Something inside me hardened like cooling lava. I met his eyes and said, very calmly, enjoy your last few days of peace. He laughed, rolling his eyes. What, you're gonna what? Call the cops on your own brother? Go ahead. See who Mom and Dad side with. Dad pointed at the door. I think you should go, Marlene, he snapped. Cool off. Stop dragging your daughter into adult messes. I looked at him, then at my mother, who was still touching Brent's arm like he was the one who needed comfort. I didn't argue. I turned to Lily. We're leaving. As we walked out, Janice leaned in and murmured, they just made this 10 times easier for a judge. I didn't feel victorious. I felt like something had died. That night, after Lily was asleep on the couch with an ice pack on her cheek, Janice called me. I've been digging, she said. And Marlene. Your brother's a walking lawsuit. She'd called in a favor from a friend who worked in HR at the car dealership where Brent was employed as a sales rep. He's already under internal investigation, she said. They've had customer complaints, missing deposits, forged signatures, lying about financing terms. One client filed a fraud claim last month. They were trying to keep it quiet. I wasn't shocked. Just Tired. Of course he was scamming people at work too. Practice makes perfect. Then Janice said, and there's something else. Your mom forwarded me a screenshot of a text she thinks is from Lily. She read it aloud. Grandma, I told Uncle Brent he could borrow the money for an emergency. Don't be mad at him, please. I'm fine, we're fine. Love you. My blood ran cold. What number is it from? I asked. Janice read it off. Definitely not Lily's. I grabbed my daughter's phone from the coffee table, thumbed through her texts. Nothing to Grandma. Nothing to Brent. Nothing about a loan. My pulse pounded as I put the phone to my ear and called Janice back. He used some app to fake a text, she said. Probably one of those spoofing apps. We can trace where it came from if we need to, but honestly, we may not even have to. The fact that it's not your daughter's number is already damning. I thought about my parents, reading that text and wanting to believe it. Wanting to believe their son was innocent so badly they'd accept life-ruining theft from a child as helping family. Janice, I said quietly, is this enough? The video. The text. His work history. She didn't hesitate. It's more than enough. Theft of a minor's savings, and we've got a pattern of fraud that shows intent. We file a report. We push for charges. We let the system do what your family clearly won't, hold him accountable. I stared at my sleeping daughter, her face still marked faintly where his hand had landed. What if my parents hate me for it? I asked, the old good daughter reflex kicking in one last time. Janice's voice softened. Let me ask you this instead, what happens if you don't? What message does that send to your daughter about her own worth? About what she's allowed to endure from family? I felt like someone had grabbed my spine and straightened it. She was right. If I backed down now, I'd be teaching Lily that her dreams, her body, her safety were negotiable as long as the person hurting her shared a last name. I wasn't doing that. Not in this lifetime. The next morning, I put on my work blazer, not because I was going to the bank, but because I needed armor. Lily got dressed in her favorite hoodie, the one with the little galaxy print on it. Janice met us outside the Albuquerque police station with a thick manila folder. Inside, the air was cool and smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. We checked in, waited, and eventually were shown into a small interview room with a metal table and 2 chairs. Detective Ramirez walked in. Mid-40s, calm brown eyes, posture that said she'd seen everything twice and nothing surprised her anymore. She sat, flipped open her notebook. All right, Ms. Turner. I'm Detective Ramirez. I understand you're here to report a theft? Yes, I said. And an assault. Saying it out loud made it feel real in a way nothing else had yet. I told her the story. The savings, the box, the video. The slap. The fake text. Janice slid each piece of evidence across the table at the right moment like we were in some legal drama, except this was my actual life. Detective Ramirez watched the video twice. She scrutinized the fake text, compared numbers. She skimmed the documentation Janice had pulled on Brent's work history, the complaints, the ongoing investigation at the dealership. When we were done, she leaned back and exhaled. This isn't a family misunderstanding, she said. This is theft. And that slap? That's battery on a minor. He's a repeat liar, and he's trying to forge evidence. We can absolutely move on this. I felt my shoulders sag, tension leaking out just a little. And just so you know, she added, glancing at Lily, you did the right thing coming in. A lot of people don't when it's family, and it only gets worse. I looked at my daughter, who was trying to sit tall in that too big chair. Do you want to say anything? I asked her gently. She swallowed. He stole from me, she said, looking at the detective. I saved for years. I didn't say he could. And I don't want him to hit anyone else. My heart cracked and healed a little all at once. Detective Ramirez nodded. Thank you for telling me. That helps. She gave us a rundown. They'd bring Brent in for questioning, present him with the evidence, and depending on his response, the DA would decide on charges. But with this much documented, she said, it was very likely to proceed. On the way out, Janice and I walked side by side. Lily walked just ahead, a little lighter somehow. I turned to you guys, in my head, the way I would later when I told this story online and asked. If you were in my shoes, would you have gone to the police? Or would you have tried to handle it within the family and hoped he magically changed? Let me know in the comments, Because the answers to that question say a lot about how we're raised. It didn't take long for the fallout to start. First came the call from Mom. "How could you do this?" she screamed as soon as I picked up. "You called the police on your own brother? Are you insane?" I held the phone away from my ear slightly. "He stole from your granddaughter, Mom. $13,000. He hit her. You are tearing this family apart," she snapped. "Brent said you gave him permission. He told us you were just mad at him because you're jealous he's finally doing better." I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. Doing better where? In what universe? He's about to be fired for fraud. "You always think you're better than everyone," Dad's voice cut in. They'd put me on speaker. Classic. "Just because you wear a blazer and sit in an office. You're a troublemaker, Marlene. You enjoy drama." That word again. Troublemaker. Growing up, that was what they called me when I pointed out unfairness. When I'd say, "Why does Brent get to go out when I have to stay home?" Or, "Why am I punished for talking back but he is not punished for skipping school?" "You're making problems out of nothing," they'd say. "You're ungrateful." Now, here we were, decades later, and the script hadn't changed. Except I had. "You know what, Mom?" I said quietly. "If holding your son accountable for stealing from a child is tearing the family apart, maybe it deserves to fall apart." There was a stunned silence on the line. "You are no daughter of mine," Dad finally said, voice shaking with rage. "You chose outsiders over your own blood." "No," I replied. "I chose my daughter over your denial." I hung up. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. From adrenaline. From release. Janice texted not 5 minutes later, "They're going to blame you for everything. Don't engage. Focus forward." She was right. It still hurt, though. You don't just flip a switch and stop wanting your parents' approval. But you can decide that their approval is not worth the cost. A day later, Brent texted me. "I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean for it to go this far. I'll pay her back. Just tell them to drop it." The audacity. I showed the text to Janice. She shook her head. "That's not an apology. That's damage control," she said. "He's not sorry he did it. He's sorry he got caught." We forwarded the text to Detective Ramirez. It became part of the file, a weak attempt to cover himself, further proof that he knew exactly what he'd done. Within a week, charges were filed: theft over $2,500, battery against a minor, and some fraud-related items that DA hacked on once the dealership cooperated with their own documentation. The dealership, by the way, wasted no time. Janice's contact told her they'd been looking for a reason to cut him loose. This just made it easier. They suspended him pending investigation. Once the charges hit, he was fired. I didn't go to see it. I didn't need to watch him carry his little cardboard box of desk junk out to his car. I knew exactly how that looked. I'd watched enough people go through it in the bank when their accounts closed and their overdrafts were called. The court date came 3 months later. Walking into that courtroom, my stomach was in knots. The air was thick with other people's problems, custody battles, DUIs, small claims. We sat on a hard bench, Janice beside me, Lily on my other side. Brent sat across the room with his public defender. He'd shaved, put on a wrinkled shirt and tie. He looked small. Not physically. Just reduced. He didn't look at us. The DA laid out the case. The video played on a screen. The fake text was dissected. The dealership's HR rep testified about his pattern of scams. A couple of angry customers spoke, too. His lawyer tried to spin it. My client believed he had permission, he argued. This is a family dispute, not a criminal act. The young girl may have misunderstood. I almost stood up right then, but Janice put a hand on my arm, gently pushing me back down. We let the evidence speak. When it was our turn, I testified. Voice shaking at first, then growing steadier. I told the judge about the savings, about Lily's dream, about what that money represented. I told her about walking that line between family loyalty and basic justice. Lily didn't have to testify, thank God. The DA felt the video and my statement were enough, especially given her age. But she sat there, shoulders squared, watching the woman in the robe decide what kind of world we were living in. When the judge finally spoke, the room went so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Mr. Turner, she said, this court has seen its fair share of theft cases. But there is something particularly disturbing about a grown man stealing not just money, but dreams from a child in his own family, and then attempting to cover it up with deception. She found him guilty on both the theft and the battery charges. She ordered restitution of the full $13,200, plus fines. Given his lack of prior convictions, jail time was minimal, but probation was lengthy and strict. Any failure to comply, any failure to pay, and he'd be back inside. Did I want him locked up for years? Honestly? No. I wanted him forced to live in the wreckage of his own choices, with no safety net. And that's exactly what happened next. With a conviction on his record, the dealership cut him loose officially. Word spread fast in Albuquerque's business circles. Sales is a small world, banking is, too. Everyone knows everyone, or knows someone who does. When your name is associated with fraud, theft, and stole from his own niece, doors don't just close, they slam. His bank accounts got tangled in garnishments and freezes as creditors, old and new, came sniffing around. Apparently, he'd been living off debt for years. I didn't watch it play out directly. I heard things secondhand, through Janice, through little snippets at the bank when clients mentioned some guy who got caught, through the grapevine from people who still saw my parents. He couch surfed for a while. Tried a few short-term gigs. Got fired when background checks came back. Fell behind on car payments. Meanwhile, my parents doubled down on their story. To them, I was the villain. The ungrateful daughter who had destroyed her brother out of jealousy. They said it at church, at family gatherings, probably to the mailman. They called once, one final time. You happy now? Mom asked, voice shaking with rage. He lost his job. He can't pay rent. You ruined his life, Marlene. Your own brother. Over some kid's savings. Some kid's savings, I repeated, stunned. That's your granddaughter. And it's not some. It was $13,000. You always exaggerate, Dad muttered in the background. I took a breath. Mom, I said, he didn't lose his job because of me. He lost it because he's a thief. I just stopped covering for him. You're dead to us, she spat, and hung up. I stared at my phone for a second, then set it down very carefully on the table, like it was something fragile that wasn't mine anymore. Then I went to the couch, sat next to Lily, who was working on a sketch of a girl standing on a cliff, hair blowing in the wind. How's it going? I asked. She shrugged. I don't know. Her face looks weird. I looked at the drawing. It didn't. It looked powerful, determined, a little sad. She looks like she's figuring stuff out, I said. That's not a bad thing. She smiled faintly. In that moment, I realized I hadn't lost a family. I just finally admitted to myself which parts were already gone. The court ordered Brent to repay the $13,200. Here's the thing they don't tell you in feel-good justice stories: just because a judge orders someone to pay doesn't mean they magically have the money. Restitution dripped in slowly. Garnished here, seized there. It wasn't fast. It definitely wasn't neat. So we didn't wait. Lily and I sat at the kitchen table one Saturday and made a new plan. Okay, I said, drawing 2 columns on a lined pad. Column A, what you can do? Column B, what I can do. Under her column, we wrote: dog walking, selling digital art commissions online, babysitting for Mrs. Garcia's grandson, school art contests with cash prizes. Under mine: extra overtime shifts at the bank, cutting back on takeout, setting aside $50 from each paycheck into a new account, this time one that required both our signatures to withdraw. It became a project we worked on together. She designed a little website for her art commissions. Janice helped us write terms that protected Lily from creepy requests. I set up a separate savings account labeled Art Dream 2.0 and showed Lily how to track deposits. Every small deposit felt like a statement: we are not victims. We're rebuilding. There were still tough days. Days when Lily would get quiet if someone mentioned family. Days when she'd flinch at loud male voices. Days when I'd see another teen at the mall with a fancy gaming laptop and feel a pang of anger on her behalf. But slowly, the anger turned into something else. Resolve. Pride. A few months after the trial, I ran into my mother at the supermarket. I was in the cereal aisle, debating between the cheap store brand and Lily's favorite name brand, when I felt that familiar prickle on the back of my neck. I turned. There she was. Mom. Holding a shopping basket with a loaf of bread and some canned soup. She looked older. Smaller. Our eyes met. For half a second, I saw something flickered there, maybe guilt, maybe regret. Then she looked away and pushed her basket past me without a word. I thought my heart would hurt. It didn't. It just settled. We're strangers now, I realized. And that might be the healthiest thing that's ever happened between us. I picked up the cereal Lily likes. The brand name one. I dropped it in the cart. We went home. We made dinner. We laughed at a stupid show. We sat side by side while she drew and I balanced our budget. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was real. And it was ours. By the time a year had passed, Lily's new savings account was over halfway to her goal. Brent's restitution payments, trickling in through the courts, helped. But most of it was her. Her art commissions took off. She drew people's pets, D&D characters, even a couple of logos for small local businesses. She learned to send invoices. She learned to say, "My rate is," without apologizing. My girl was learning not just art, but boundaries and value, lessons I'd taken decades to figure out. I stayed at the bank. I got another promotion, this time to oversee consumer lending operations at our branch. I put a little more away for her college fund. I paid down my own debts. I started sleeping through the night again. Brent? I don't know exactly. I heard through the grapevine he'd left town for a while, tried his luck in another state, but with a record like his and the internet being what it is, you can't really outrun who you are. He sent one email, about 10 months after the trial. Subject line, "Can we talk?" I didn't open it. I didn't need to know if it contained blame, manipulation, or some half-hearted apology. I didn't need to know if he was finally getting help or if he was trying to guilt me into fixing his mess again. I dragged it into a folder labeled evidence, in case he ever tried something again, and moved on. Because here's the thing. Karmic justice isn't me watching every piece of his downfall like a movie. Karmic justice is me not having to care. If you've made it this far, you probably see some part of your own story in this. Maybe you've got your own parasite in the family, the sibling who can do no wrong in your parents' eyes, no matter how much harm they cause. Maybe you're the one who always fixes everything. The one who gets called when the lights are about to get cut off, when someone needs bail, when they just need a small loan they never intend to repay. Maybe you've been told, like I was, that calling out abuse makes you the problem. So here's what I learned, and what I want you to hear clearly. Family isn't who shares your DNA. Family is who protects you, who respects you, who doesn't ask you to plead for their bad decisions. You are not ungrateful for refusing to cover for someone who hurts you or your child. That's not betrayal. That's self-respect. Loyalty without limits is just self-destruction dressed up as virtue. There is nothing noble about sacrificing your child's safety, your mental health, or your future for someone who would never do the same for you. Public justice matters. When private conversations and handling it inside the family is just code for bury it and keep letting it happen, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk into a police station and say, "Enough." And maybe the biggest one. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not to destroy someone, but to stop protecting them from the consequences of their own actions. That's what I did with my brother. I didn't ruin his life. I just stepped out of the way and let his choices catch up to him. If you're listening to this and thinking of someone in your own life, ask yourself. If I keep protecting them, who is protecting me? What am I teaching my kids about their own worth? If this story were unfolding in front of me as a stranger's YouTube video, whose side would I be on? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm genuinely curious. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have called the cops on your own brother? Or walked away and tried to forget? And if this story resonated with you at all, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded. You're not evil for choosing yourself and your child over a toxic family member. You're just finally being fair to the only people you're truly responsible for. Me? I'm Marlene. I'm a single mom in Albuquerque. My daughter is saving for her dream again. We're okay. And that, more than any sentence a judge could give, is the ending that matters.